Welcome back to the deep dive. If you've ever tried to make a really significant change in your life, maybe career, health, some big habit, you probably, like most of us, kind of expected a moment.
Yeah, that big flash of insight, right? The clouds part, the
Mm.
dramatic movie scene revelation.
Exactly, where suddenly the path is clear and you think, aha, I get it now, I'm changed.
And, well, that expectation, that whole waiting game for the lightning bolt, that's precisely what often kills change before it even gets off the ground.
Uh-huh.
The source material we're diving into today, it's incredibly refreshingly honest about this. It really confirms that the actual beginning of lasting change. It's way less glamorous, it's quieter, and maybe counterintuitively, it's actually much more powerful that way.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to cut through all that noise. We're digging into basically three key questions. Why do we struggle so much to just start even when we know we probably should? How do you actually correctly read that internal signal that says, okay, you're ready now?
Right.
And maybe the most critical piece, how do we build goals that actually last? Goals that have a solid foundation so they don't just crumble the first time things get a little tough.
And what we found, synthesizing this material, is you really don't need some huge crisis to kick things off. You don't need to hit rock bottom.
Which is good news, I think.
It is. What the sources consistently show is that the most fertile ground for change is often just becoming aware of this kind of ongoing, persistent, almost like an unscratchable itch. You know that feeling?
Yeah, that low-level hum of dissatisfaction.
Exactly. That chronic, quiet feeling. That is the real, reliable catalyst, not the drama.
Okay, let's really unpack this idea of the quiet spark, because I think you're right. If we're all sitting around waiting for the big dramatic revelation, we might genuinely be waiting forever.
We might.
The sources seem clear. The reality of starting is often profoundly anticlimactic. And maybe that's okay. Maybe it's better.
It's definitely a huge shift in perspective. If you actually look at people who have made significant, lasting shifts in their lives, the start is very rarely marked by some big trauma or event.
Right.
It's marked by repetition. It's that moment, maybe it's a Tuesday morning, you wake up and you just realize, wow, I've been having this same negative thought loop for like the last month.
Uh-huh. The same conversation in your head?
Yeah, exactly. It's not a sudden break. It's the quiet recognition of a pattern. It's that inner voice finally getting clear saying, I'm just so tired of feeling this specific way, or that little nagging whisper that gets louder. There's got to be something more than this routine.
And I think that quietness, maybe that's where the real strategic power is. Because if the beginning is quiet, it means you stop waiting for something outside yourself to give you permission.
External validation.
Yeah, you stop kind of lying to yourself, pretending you're okay when you're not really okay, and you finally have to admit, look, if I don't actually do something different today, tomorrow's just going to be a rerun of yesterday.
That's it.
That moment of just radical self-honesty where you admit the status quo is actually pretty exhausting. That feels like the real strength of this quiet beginning.
And what's fascinating, from a psychological angle, is how often we completely misinterpret these persistent thoughts.
How so?
Well, we dismiss them, right? We think it's just random anxiety or, general noise in our heads, or maybe just a bad mood we need to snap out of.
Just got to power through it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the sources are really clear on this. These repetitive, nagging feelings, whether they're about your job, feeling stagnant, maybe your health isn't where you want it, a relationship feels draining, or even just the sheer boredom of your day-to-day. These aren't just noise. They're critical signals, vital signals.
Signals, not noise. I like that framing. It gives them purpose. So, okay, if we accept them as signals, what are they trying to tell us? Is it just, hey, you're unhappy, or is it more specific?
It's definitely both, but the real emphasis seems to be on pointing towards an addressable problem. Think about it almost scientifically. Your mind, both conscious and subconscious, is trying to flag a mismatch.
A mismatch between
Your internal blueprint, like how you believe life should be or could be, and how it actually is right now. It's your internal systems basically saying, warning, slight deviation from optimal path detected.
like a check engine light.
Precisely. It's not the engine blowing up. It's the early warning light flashing. And if you ignore that subtle signal, that quiet spark, it doesn't just vanish.
No, usually it gets louder.
It gets louder, it kind of metastasizes, and eventually, it can turn into that full-blown internal crisis we thought was the only way change could start. You have a chance, a really good chance, to course correct when the signal's still quiet. Once it's a 5-alarm fire, your options become much, much narrower.
Okay, so if the spark is quiet, maybe even subtle, We need a reliable way to spot that internal pattern, the one that comes before the decision to actually change. If we can't count on drama, what are the internal signs we should be looking out for?
Well, the sources really highlight three common psychological precursors. And when they start to stack up, they seem to create this undeniable internal push towards taking action.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first one is maybe the most intuitive, but it really does require some deep personal honesty. Noticing the gap.
The gap.
Yeah, the difference, the distance between where you are right now today and where you genuinely truly wish you were. And crucially, the sources really stress this assessment has to be personal, internally validated.
Meaning not comparing yourself to others, not looking at Instagram.
Exactly. This isn't about keeping up with the Joneses or feeling bad because someone's feed looks perfect. This is purely you, looking at yourself, assessing your own internal satisfaction, your own alignment. Where am I versus where did I say I wanted to be?
That distinction feels critical because, external comparison often just fuels jealousy or anxiety.
Right. It's often destructive.
But that internal comparison, where am I, versus my own intentions or values, that feels like it could fuel action. So when that gap starts to genuinely bother you deep down, that's sign number one.
That's a major sign.
Okay. What about the tangible stuff, the physical world?
Well, that leads right into the second sign, the accumulation of small things. These are the issues that, taken one by one, seem completely minor, trivial even, manageable.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Okay, it's maybe the pants that are just a little too tight, not drastically, but uncomfortably. It's the commute to work that leaves you feeling drained, physically or emotionally, but you kind of minimize it every day. Oh, it's just traffic.
Right. Or that pile of mail you keep meaning to sort through.
Exactly. Or that difficult conversation you need to have with a colleague or maybe a family member, and you keep putting it off. I'll do it next week, and then next week comes.
And you say, next week again? We've all been there. They seem like just life, right? Everyone deals with this stuff.
Precisely. They're easy to dismiss. But here's the thing the sources explain. The collective weight of these small, seemingly minor dissatisfactions is actually quite cognitively draining.
How so?
Well, think of each of these unresolved things,
Hmm.
the tight pants, the draining commute, the avoided conversation, as imposing a tiny little tax on your mental energy.
Yeah.
It's this constant background drain, sometimes called decision fatigue or cognitive load.
Ah, okay.
Every time you see that pile of mail or feel those uncomfortable clothes or think about that commute, your brain has to expend a little bit of energy on the avoidance strategy or the rationalization, and they just pile up. They create this emotional and psychological mass that eventually becomes heavy enough that you just can't ignore the total cost anymore.
So it's not one big problem. It's the death by 1,000 paper cuts kind of thing.
Exactly. It's the friction, the accumulation of friction, not the single big boulder that eventually grinds things to a halt.
Okay, that makes sense. And the third pattern, you said this one was maybe the most powerful.
Yeah, this one is often the real kicker, psychologically speaking. Playing the movie forward.
Playing the movie forward.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It's that mental exercise where you fast forward your life. Imagine yourself 5, maybe 10 years down the line, but, and this is key, you hold all the important variables constant. Assume nothing significant changes. You just keep doing what you're doing now, and you really look at that future self.
Okay.
Now, the really crucial insight here from the sources is that the future doesn't actually have to look terrible to motivate change. In fact, if your projected future looks genuinely terrible, you probably already have an immediate crisis you're dealing with.
Right. The motivation is already there,
Yeah.
forced upon you.
Exactly. The real trigger, the one that often motivates transformation in people who are currently stable, even comfortable, is the dawning realization that the future might look perfectly fine.
Fine. Just fine.
It's just fine. Secure, predictable, maybe even adequate, comfortable even. But then this deep internal voice just hits you. Fine isn't enough anymore.
Wow.
It's the fear of stagnation, the fear of potential just sitting there, untapped. That specific fear, the fear of just fine, can generate tremendous internal pressure for change.
That fear of fine, I can see how that could be even more motivating in a slow burn kind of way than the fear of outright disaster. Disaster forces a reaction, like you said. But the fear of fine, that requires real proactive thinking, looking ahead.
Deep introspection, yeah.
And we actually have a really compelling story from the source material that just perfectly illustrates this, how the predictability of fine can become utterly suffocating.
Yeah, this story is powerful. It's about a man, he was 29 years old at the time, working as an aircraft technician in the Zimbabwean Air Force. Now,
Mhm.
on the surface, you'd say he had stability, right? He had a technical skill,
Oh, respectable job.
a respectable job. But the reality was, for over 10 years, his income had basically flatlined. It hovered around $350 a month.
Yeah.
And while obviously that's a huge financial constraint, the real internal stark for him, the thing that started the change, wasn't just the money itself. It was the crushing lack of possibility.
Tell us more about that predictability, because the way the sources describe it, it really paints a picture of, yeah, suffocation.
It was intense. He could see his entire future path laid out with this almost painful clarity. He knew, for example, that eventually he'd likely get government housing, and he knew exactly what kind. It would be specific, low-grade concrete block housing.
You could visualize it.
Totally. He knew the kind of car he'd eventually be able to afford, probably a 10-year-old beat-up Toyota or Honda, rattling its way over these enormous permanent potholes that were just a feature of every major road there. He could picture the cheap, maybe knockoff, suit he'd wear to church or official functions. He knew the limited options for his kids' education. He even knew the specific brand of, like, cheap cologne that seemed to define the Sunday routine for men in his position.
And the thing is, there's nothing inherently wrong with that life, right? It's stable, it's known, it's perfectly respectable in its own way.
Absolutely nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
And plenty of good, decent people live that life with dignity. But for him, in that moment of realization, it didn't feel like stability. He described it as slow suffocation.
Wow.
It felt like this completely known quantity, like a comfortable cage that was actively physically blocking him from exploring any of the other infinite unknown paths that might be out there for him. He realized he was just living out some pre-written script, like he was stuck in a simulation, just watching his own life play out without any real agency.
So what happened inside him? How did he react to that feeling, that sense of just checking out?
Well, the sources say he really had checked out. Mentally, emotionally, from his work, from his marriage, even from his faith. He was apparently in a pretty dark place.
Understandable.
But right there, in that moment of just stark, clear-eyed realization about the suffocating predictability, something fundamental shifted, a spark ignited, and it was simply the refusal to settle.
The refusal to settle.
That choice, that mental line in the sand saying, no, I will not accept this known script, even if it seems safe, even if it's comfortable. That became the driving force. It wasn't about getting rich quick or anything like that. It was about reclaiming a sense of agency over his own future.
That's such a powerful example of how that gap we talked about and the fear of just fine can combine to create this unstoppable internal drive.
Exactly. He realized that settling for adequacy today was basically guaranteeing mediocrity tomorrow. And for him, that realization was ultimately more terrifying than the uncertainty of trying something completely new. So this internal momentum, this refusal to settle that we see in that story, it brings us right to a feeling that, let's be honest, we usually try very hard to avoid discomfort.
Yeah, discomfort is usually code for stop or turn back.
Right. It's inevitable in any kind of growth, but we have to stop treating every single negative feeling as just a warning sign to retreat. The absolute key here is learning to distinguish between, say, burnout stress that genuinely requires rest or asking for help, and what the sources call productive discomfort.
Okay, that feels like a really vital distinction, because my default, if I feel bad or uncomfortable doing something new, is often to think, whoa, pushing too hard, need to back off. How do we tell the difference? How do we know if it's burnout or if it's this productive kind?
It's a great question. Generally, true stress or burnout often comes from external pressures, maybe unsustainable workloads, or just plain exhaustion. And the solution there is recovery, setting boundaries, maybe even removing yourself from a toxic source.
Right. Rest or change the environment.
Exactly. Productive discomfort, though, feels different. It's more like your internal GPS gently saying, warning,
Yeah.
you seem to be deviating from your core values. It's a sign that your current actions and your deeply held beliefs are kind of out of sync.
Ah, okay, so it's an internal conflict signal.
Precisely. It's actually a valuable signal, one worth paying close attention to, not just automatically shutting down or avoiding.
So how do we test it? If I'm feeling some kind of internal friction or unease, how do I know if it's the good kind, the productive kind? The sources give us some criteria, right?
They do. 3 pretty concrete criteria to help you spot it. Criteria number 1 is, you can name it.
Name.
Yeah, it has to be specific. It can't just be this vague, generalized anxiety that's sort of floating around in your head. If you just find yourself saying, ugh, I feel uneasy or something's off, that's probably closer to general stress or anxiety.
Okay.
But if you can point a finger directly at the problem and actually articulate it clearly, you've likely found productive discomfort. For instance, I am consistently unhappy with my current fitness level and the lack of energy it results in. That's specific.
Or, my current career path is mathematically guaranteed to lead me to a place I genuinely don't want to be in 5 years.
Perfect. Or even, I'm not satisfied with the kind of energy I'm bringing to my most important relationships lately. See how specific those are?
Yeah, that clarity forces you to stop generalizing, stop waving it away, and actually start thinking about the specific issue.
Exactly right. And that leads directly to the second criterion.
Sure.
It points toward action. Productive discomfort almost naturally suggests a potential path forward, even if that path looks difficult or challenging right now. If you're uncomfortable with your health, like in the example, the path forward is pretty clear, right? Make different choices about food, movement, sleep. It might be hard, but the what is obvious.
Right, unlike just worrying about something huge and uncontrollable.
Precisely. That's the distinction. You can worry yourself sick about, say, global politics or the economy, but that anxiety is often paralyzing because you, personally, feel like you can't really control the outcome. Productive discomfort is fundamentally tied to your personal agency. It highlights something that you can actually do something about.
Okay, so if the worry is about some massive external thing I can't influence, it's likely stress and needs managing differently, acceptance, maybe your perspective. But if the worry is about a goal or an area of my life where I could be taking action, but I'm not, that's productive discomfort, basically calling me out.
That's a great way to put it, calling you back to action. And the third criterion is maybe the deepest one, and it really connects to the identity discussion we'll get into later. It conflicts with your values.
Conflicts with your values. How so?
The tension you're feeling, it isn't just random. It arises from a fundamental mismatch between how you are actually living your life day to day and what you genuinely, truly care about at a core level.
Can you give an example of that value conflict?
Sure. Let's say you genuinely deeply value intellectual growth and learning. It's part of how you see yourself.
Okay.
Yet, if you look honestly at your daily habits, maybe you spend all your free time on, say, passive entertainment, scrolling feeds, avoiding any kind of challenging reading or deliberate skill development. The discomfort you feel in that scenario, that's the dissonance. It's the gap between the person you believe you are a lifelong learner and the actions you're actually taking, maybe being more of a passive consumer.
Ooh, that hits home.
Or another one. Perhaps you really value strong family connections, but maybe your work schedule or the exhaustion that follows it means you routinely show up late or irritable or distracted, and you end up sacrificing that quality time you claim to value.
Yeah.
That gap, that tension between your stated value and your actual enacted behavior, that dissonance is the engine of productive discomfort. So when you can clearly name the feeling, identify the action it's suggesting, and trace it back to a core value that feels like it's being violated, then you know you found a feeling worth listening to, worth leaning into, not running away from. It's basically your internal compass saying, hey, recalibrate, you're off course.
All right, so let's say we've done the work, we've recognized the quiet spark, maybe we've even identified that productive discomfort and connected it to our values. We feel that internal pressure building. Now we hit the wall.
Ah, yes, the bottleneck.
The bottleneck. That enormous gap feels like a canyon sometimes between wanting to change and actually finally doing something about it. This transition from just intending to actually implementing, this is where so many dreams just fizzle out.
It really is. And the sources point to three major psychological barriers, almost like defense mechanisms, that keep us stuck in that gap, protecting us from actually taking action.
Okay, what's the first barrier? This one sounds tricky.
It is, because it often disguises itself as being responsible or thorough. Over-planning as avoidance.
Over-planning, like research paralysis.
Exactly. This is that stage where we get completely trapped in the perpetual research loop. We read every single article, listen to all the podcasts on the topic, maybe buy a stack of books. We design the perfect plan, with detailed spreadsheets, maybe color-coded schedules, multiple backup plans for every conceivable setback.
It feels incredibly productive while you're doing it, though, right? You feel like you're making progress, getting prepared, becoming an expert.
Oh, totally. It gives you this huge psychological payoff.
Yeah.
It makes you feel like you're reducing risk, like you're competent, you're in control, and all the while, you're staying completely safe. Safe from the actual scary part. As the sources put it, this is really just vulnerability avoidance, plain and simple. Planning is neat, it's contained, it's intellectually stimulating. Action, on the other hand, is messy. It's uncertain. It involves the risk of actual failure or looking silly.
Uh-huh.
So we avoid that scary, messy, vulnerable bit, the actual start, by just staying indefinitely in the safe harbor of research and planning.
Mm-hmm.
We cleverly confuse motion with actual progress.
We're basically hiding behind the complexity of the plan.
That's a perfect way to put it,
And
hiding behind the spreadsheet. Now, the second barrier is also really potent, especially perhaps for people who are generally high achievers
Mhm.
or used to being competent in their field. The fear of looking stupid.
The beginner's mind problem.
Exactly. If you've reached a certain level of skill or status, whether professionally or personally, starting something totally new throws you right back to square one. You will be a beginner again. You will feel clumsy. You will make mistakes that seem obvious to people who've been doing it longer.
But hang on, isn't that fear sometimes rational? I mean, if I'm, say, a successful executive and I suddenly start trying to learn, I don't know, coding or playing the ukulele very publicly and very badly, won't that actually damage my reputation for competence? How do the sources suggest we handle the potential real social cost of being bad at something new?
That's a really fair challenge. And the sources do acknowledge that, yes, the social cost of perceived incompetence can feel very real. But they argue pretty compellingly that the internal cost of stagnation, of not growing, is ultimately much higher.
Okay, so how do we manage it then?
They suggest a couple of strategies. First, try to redefine competence for yourself. Maybe competence isn't just about being perfect right now. Maybe true competence includes the ability to learn, to adapt, to embrace the beginner phase as a necessary skill in itself. If you frame learning to be a beginner as a competency, the ego might relax a little.
Interesting reframing. What's the second strategy?
Compartmentalize. Especially in the early stages, those first small steps we'll talk about next, there probably shouldn't be public performances. Do them in private or with a very small, trusted audience. Give yourself permission, give yourself the space to be bad in secret first, build up a little internal proof, a little capability before you even think about risking wider scrutiny.
So allow for the awkward phase, just maybe don't broadcast it immediately.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Because that intense desire to avoid the awkward beginner phase at all costs, that's the ego setting a trap, and it prevents the start altogether. The ego would rather preserve the illusion of competence through inaction than risk the temporary reality of imperfection through action.
Okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense. And the third barrier,
This one is the all or nothing trap.
all or nothing.
Yeah, this is that deeply ingrained belief that if you can't commit 100% flawlessly, dedicating hours every single day right from the start, then, well, then there's just no point in even beginning. It's the voice that says, well, if I can't train for the marathon properly 5 days a week, why even bother going for a 10-minute walk?
That sounds oddly logical on the surface, doesn't it? Like, if the effort isn't going to be maximized for the best possible return, why waste the energy?
It sounds logical, very rational even. But in reality, the sources argue it's basically perfectionism being weaponized as self-sabotage.
Weaponized perfectionism.
How? The brain uses this rigid, impossibly high standard as a really convenient excuse for continued inaction. If the bar is set at perfect execution, total commitment, immediate visible results, then any tiny deviation, any missed day, any imperfection gives you a perfectly plausible, socially acceptable reason to quit.
The built-in escape hatch.
Exactly. You get to tell yourself and maybe others, oh, I would have succeeded, I really wanted to, but I just couldn't dedicate the necessary hours, or life got in the way. It allows us to maintain this narrative of external failure, lack of time, lack of resources, rather than confronting the simpler, maybe more uncomfortable truth. We just chose not to start small and imperfectly. The underlying goal of this trap is often to protect us from the potential pain of trying really hard and maybe still not succeeding.
Okay, so if these major barriers, the overplanning, the fear of looking bad, the all-or-nothing trap, are all essentially ways our brains try to avoid the vulnerability of actually doing something.
Which they largely are, yes.
And then the logical solution must be to find ways to strategically lower the stakes, to minimize that feeling of vulnerability, right? And this seems to be why the sources argue so strongly for the power of smallness, starting small.
Absolutely. Taking smaller, much more clearly defined steps is almost always superior to attempting these massive, intimidating leaps right out of the gate.
And you're saying this isn't just like feel-good advice. There are actual mechanisms behind why small works better.
Yes, this is behavioral strategy, really. The sources point to at least 4 core mechanisms. First, and maybe most importantly, completing a small step creates internal proof.
Internal proof. Proof of what?
Proof to yourself. When you successfully complete a tiny defined action, maybe it's doing that 5-minute chore you've been avoiding, Writing that single difficult email, taking that 10-minute walk, you provide concrete, undeniable evidence to your own brain that you can make a decision and follow through on it.
Why is that internal proof more powerful than, say, getting praised by someone else?
Because self-trust is the absolute engine of momentum. External validation is nice, but it's fleeting, right? Praise can stop, social media likes disappear. But that successful completion of a microtask, that creates a neurological feedback loop inside you. I intended, I acted, I succeeded. Okay, this internal evidence builds genuine self-trust, confidence in your own capability to execute. And that self-trust is fundamental for long-term resilience when things get tough.
Got it. Building trust in yourself, one small win at a time. Okay, mechanism number 2. Small steps reduce resistance.
Significantly. Your brain, fundamentally, is an efficiency machine. It wants to conserve energy, so it will naturally fight hard against a huge, vague, energy-intensive goal like get completely healthy or become financially independent.
Yeah, those feel overwhelming just saying them.
Right. But that same brain barely puts up a fight against a highly specific, very small task like walk around the block once after dinner or transfer $5 into the savings account right now and log it. Less internal friction simply means a higher probability of the action actually happening. When the energy needed to start, the task is lower than the mental energy needed to invent a plausible excuse, you usually just do the task.
Huh. Lower the bar until it's easier to step over it than to walk around it.
Okay, third mechanism. Action creates its own energy. This sounds a bit like physics. It really is. It's Newton's first law, basically. An object at rest stays at rest. An object in motion stays in motion. Momentum is generated by movement. Getting started, overcoming that initial inertia, that's by far the hardest part emotionally and cognitively.
Deactivation energy.
Exactly. Once you're actually moving, even just a little bit, continuing that movement requires less mental effort than initiating it from a dead stop. Think about pushing a heavy car. Getting it rolling takes a massive shove, but keeping it rolling is comparatively easier. That first tiny step is just about breaking the inertia and generating a little bit of psychological energy to keep things flowing.
Okay, makes sense. And the last one, imperfect action provides real-world learning. We touched on this earlier.
Yes, and this is where the meticulous overplanner gets completely exposed. Your theoretical plan, worked out perfectly on paper or in a spreadsheet, might look beautiful and pristine, utterly flawless. But the very moment you take that first small, inevitably imperfect action out in the real world, you get immediate, messy, invaluable feedback. You instantly start learning what actually works for you in your specific context with your constraints. You see what needs tweaking, what you underestimated, what you overestimated. This dynamic real-world feedback loop is always superior to any amount of safe theoretical planning done in isolation. Action is the only way the plan gets refined into something useful.
Okay, let's make this super concrete. Can we contrast some typical, maybe ineffective, large goals with the strategic small moves the sources recommend? This feels like where listeners can get an immediate takeaway.
Absolutely. So let's take a common, vague, overwhelming goal. I need to completely reorganize my entire life. People actually say this.
Yeah, it feels huge and paralyzing. What's the strategic small move there?
The strategic move addresses the feeling of overwhelm, but drastically minimizes the resistance. It might be something like, okay, tomorrow morning, first thing, before anything else, I will spend exactly 15 minutes writing down my absolute non-negotiable priorities just for the next 72 hours. It's specific, it's time-bound, and it aims to create clarity instead of just wallowing in the chaos.
Okay, good one. How about this? Instead of the big ego-driven all-or-nothing goal like, I'm going to master this complex new skill, which immediately triggers that fear of looking stupid we talked about.
Right. The strategic alternative is to frame it as low-stakes exploration. So you might try, okay, today I will spend 20 minutes, maybe with the door closed so no one sees me, just learning the 3 most fundamental vocabulary terms or basic principles of that skill. It reframes the activity from performance to information gathering. Much less intimidating.
Yeah, lowers the pressure significantly. One more, relationships. Instead of the massive, heavy commitment like, I need to fix my struggling relationship, which just feels like trying to move a mountain.
Yeah, that's huge. The small strategic move might be, sometime today, I will initiate one specific, honest conversation about one small thing that's been bothering me. And my only goal for this conversation is to express my feeling or need clearly, not to assign blame or demand a solution right now.
Focusing on the action, speaking honestly, not the immediate outcome, fixing everything.
Exactly. These aren't about compromising on the ultimate goal. They're intentional, highly strategic first moves designed specifically to overcome that initial inertia, provide that crucial internal proof of capability, and do it without setting off all the brain's protective alarms. So we figured out how to get started, how to use these small strategic steps to break through inertia. That's huge. But if those small steps are all aimed at a fundamentally flawed type of goal, the whole effort is likely to fizzle out as soon as progress inevitably slows down.
Right, the why behind the what needs to be solid.
Exactly. Which brings us to this really critical distinction the sources make between what they call surface goals and deep goals.
Surface goals versus deep goals. Okay. I suspect most of us, probably naturally, gravitate towards surface goals first. Because they feel tangible, right?
Yeah.
They're measurable. They focus on outcomes, on acquiring things.
Precisely. Losing X pounds, earning Y amount of money, getting Z number of followers or clients. These are all typical surface goals.
And what's the problem with they seem motivating?
They can be motivating initially, especially if the path seems clear and progress is quick. But that's exactly why they're so vulnerable. Surface goals are fine when everything's going smoothly. But the moment you hit a plateau, which you always will, or when external circumstances slow you down, your motivation just collapses. Why? Because the immediate reward, the outcome you were chasing, suddenly feels delayed or uncertain.
Ah, the motivation is tied directly to the result. No motivation.
Pretty much. Plus, if the goal is purely about acquisition, more money, more status, more stuff, it becomes incredibly susceptible to that corrosive comparison with others we mentioned earlier. You start looking around, seeing others achieving faster, and it just derails your own effort and focus.
Okay, so if surface goals are mostly about having or achieving an outcome, what are deep goals focused on?
Deep goals, fundamentally, are focused on becoming. They are about shaping your identity.
Becoming. Becoming what?
Becoming a certain type of person, someone who embodies a consistent set of values and behaviors. For example, not just lose weight, but become someone who consistently honors their body. Not just make more money, but become someone who relentlessly creates genuine value for others. Not just be less stressed, but become someone who lives with integrity and clear boundaries. See the shift. These goals are tied directly to who you want to be at your core.
Wow, okay. That feels profound. And I can immediately see the difference in resilience. Because if you hit a roadblock when you're outcome focused, like you said, you might quit because the outcome feels too far away.
Exactly.
But if you're identity focused, the process itself, even the struggle, even the days you don't make huge outward progress, actually reinforces who you're trying to become. Just showing up, just doing the reps even badly, it reaffirms that identity.
That's the magic. It becomes self-sustaining motivation. You're no longer just chasing the carrot. You're actively living the identity you're building, moment by moment, action by action. The work itself becomes the reward, in a way.
So how do we know if our goals are just surface level fluff or if they're actually these deep identity-based goals built to last? The sources give us some tests, right? Like filters.
They do. 3 really robust filters to run your goals through. Filter number 1, the privacy test.
The privacy test.
Yeah.
What's that?
Ask yourself this. If nobody, absolutely nobody, not your friends, not your family, not your partner, not a single soul on social media, not even a mentor, if nobody ever knew you were pursuing this goal or that you achieved it, would still matter deeply to you,
Ooh, that cuts right to the chase.
doesn't it? It immediately separates the intrinsic motivation from the ego-driven pursuit of external validation. If the goal suddenly loses all its appeal the moment you imagine the audience disappearing, then you're probably chasing recognition, not transformation.
So if I only care about my fitness when I can post about it or when my running group is watching.
Then the goal is likely about performance for others, not about permanently becoming someone who values their health for its own sake. Goals built on genuine internal values will always pass the privacy test.
Okay, that's powerful. Filter number 2.
The process test. Ask yourself, does the actual daily work required to move towards this goal, including the inherent struggle, the mundane routine, the necessary sacrifices, does that work actively make you more of the person you aspire to be?
So is the journey itself aligning with the destination identity?
Precisely. If the process feels soul-crushing, if it forces you to compromise your deeply held values, like maybe sacrificing integrity for profit or neglecting family for ambition, then you're probably just pursuing acquisition, not genuine becoming. But if the process itself aligns with and reinforces your desired identity, for instance, if the discipline required to write each day makes you feel more like a writer, even before the book is published or sells a single copy, then that alignment will sustain you through the hard times. The process has to feed the identity.
Okay. And the third filter.
The learning test. Ask, Will pursuing this goal teach me something truly valuable about myself, about the world, about resilience, about a skill, even if I ultimately fail to achieve the specific measurable outcome I initially set?
So is there value in the attempt itself, regardless of the final score?
Exactly. If the goal is structured in such a way that it offers profound learning and personal growth just through the act of striving like. Maybe the struggle to learn a new language teaches you incredible patience and cultural humility, even if you never become perfectly fluent, then it's a goal worth pursuing. Goals that fail the learning test are often just empty targets. Goals that pass it are potentially transformative experiences, win or lose the game.
So the huge strategic shift here, it seems, is moving our focus from obsessively tracking external results to consistently tracking the behaviors that reinforce the identity we want to build. How do we actually phrase that for ourselves, practically?
It really comes down to changing the language you use, especially internally in your self-talk. You have to
Yeah.
consciously stop using those external metrics as your primary why. So instead of declaring, my goal is to lose 20 pounds, you need to internalize the identity. My goal is to become someone who honors their body by making consistently healthy choices day after day.
Okay, I see the difference. Or instead of, I want to earn six figures, which depends so much on the market, luck, external factors.
Right. You reframe it around the actions and identity you can control. My goal is to become someone who consistently creates real, measurable value for others and who manages the resources they generate with discipline and foresight.
That second version feels so much more empowering.
It is, because it ensures that every single positive action you take, studying a new skill, saving an extra $10 instead of spending it, drafting a thoughtful proposal for a client, having that slightly uncomfortable, honest conversation, every one of those actions directly reinforces your chosen identity. It fundamentally shifts your internal motivation system. You start building motivation from the inside out based on who you are becoming long before the big outcome even arrives. That makes the whole endeavor much, much harder to break.
Okay, this is fantastic. We've covered the philosophy, the quiet start. We've got the strategy, small, actionable steps. And we have the framework, building identity-based goals, not just chasing outcomes. Now let's bring it all together. Let's talk about the absolute practical checklist based on everything we've discussed from the sources for someone listening right now who feels that itch, feels ready, and wants to actually move today, convert the theory into reality.
Right. The what do I do now moment.
Yeah.
Okay, step one, and we really can't emphasize this enough. Get brutally honest about where you are right now.
Brutally honest.
Brutally honest. This has to be an exercise in objective data collection, zero self-judgment, no beating yourself up, no moralizing, just the facts. You simply cannot navigate effectively if you don't know your precise starting coordinates. And frankly, most people are operating based on vague feelings or assumptions, not actual data about their lives.
So what does that practical honesty look like in action? Give us some examples.
Okay, it might mean actually logging your real food intake for, say, 3 consecutive days. Not the idealized version you tell yourself, but every single snack, every drink, every mindless bite. Write it down.
Ouch. Okay.
Or it could mean tracking how you actually spend your time for a full week. Use a timer, an app, a notebook, whatever works. Note down exactly how many hours slip into passive media consumption versus focused work or quality connection.
See where the time really goes.
See where it really goes.
Okay.
For finances, it means sitting down and writing out your complete, unfiltered current financial picture down to the penny. Income, expenses, all debt, credit cards, loans, everything, recurring subscriptions. Get the full, potentially uncomfortable picture. For relationships, it might mean honestly assessing which connections energize you and which consistently drain you. Data, not denial.
You can't solve a problem you haven't accurately diagnosed first. Makes total sense. Okay, step 2. This connects back to the small steps idea, right?
Directly back. Step 2 is pick one specific 24-hour action.
One specific action doable within 24 hours. Why so tight?
The emphasis is squarely on specificity and immediacy. The action needs to be so crystal clear, so unambiguous that you will know without a single shred of doubt whether you successfully completed it or not within the next 24 hours. No wiggle room.
So not, I'll start being healthier tomorrow.
Definitely not. Way too vague. Instead, something like, I will walk outside for exactly 10 minutes immediately after I finish my lunch today. Boom. Done or not done?
Or not, I need to be a better parent.
Way too broad.
Right.
Truth. Tonight, when my kids get home from school, I will put my phone in a drawer in another room and leave it there until after dinner is finished. Specific, measurable, time-bound. This structure maximizes the probability of an immediate win, giving you that crucial dose of internal proof we talked about.
Build that momentum from the first tiny success.
Okay.
And finally, step 3. You said this was maybe the most important for making it last.
Yes. For ensuring longevity, step 3 is crucial. Dig into the deeper why. This is where you consciously connect that tiny, specific 24-hour action you just committed to back to the powerful identity-based goal you hopefully established earlier.
Okay, how do we do that digging?
You have to be relentless with yourself. Don't just settle for the first, easy, surface-level answer that comes to mind. You need to ask yourself, okay, but why does that matter? And then when you answer, ask it again. And why does that matter? Keep asking why until you hit bedrock.
Bedrock.
Yeah, until you uncover a reason that feels genuinely powerful, maybe even emotional, a non-negotiable reason that resonates deep inside you. Because that deep reason is what will fuel your resilience when things inevitably get hard or tedious or boring down the road.
Can we walk through that digging deeper chain with an example? Maybe the health one again?
Sure. Okay, so the surface action is walk for 10 minutes after lunch. The surface goal might be, I want to be healthier. Fine. Now dig, ask, why does being healthier matter?
Okay, maybe the first answer is, because I want to lose some weight and maybe feel a bit better about how I look.
Okay, that's common. It's honest, but it's still pretty surface level, maybe tied to ego or appearance. It might not be enough when it's raining outside and you're tired. So you have to ask again. Okay, but why does losing weight and feeling better matter?
Deeper. Maybe the answer is because I want to have more sustained energy throughout the day. I want to be able to really show up for my kids when I get home from work, be fully present instead of just crashing on the sofa feeling exhausted.
Getting warmer, much stronger now. That's tied to values, family, presence. But we can probably go one level deeper still. Ask again. And why does having energy and showing up for your kids truly matter?
Okay. Wow. Maybe the deepest answer, the bedrock, is something like, because I don't want my children's main memories of me when they look back years from now to be of someone who was always too tired or too stressed or too sick to really engage with them, to play with them, to be fully there during their childhood.
Boom. That's bedrock. See the difference? That deepest motivation, that core emotional anchor, provides a level of personal gravity, a non-negotiable pull, that a surface goal about just losing 20 pounds simply cannot match. That's the intrinsic force that makes the daily walk, even when it's inconvenient, feel essential, not optional. Hashtag tag that outro.
So what this whole deep dive really seems to clarify is the reality of how personal change actually begins. And it's kind of a paradox, isn't it? In one way, it's much simpler than we usually make it.
Yeah, simpler because you really don't need the perfect cosmic alignment or the flawless plan or some huge crisis. You just need to choose one tiny, specific action and take the first step. Just start.
It's also inherently harder than we wish it was because it demands that you act while you're still uncertain. You have to be willing to accept that your first attempts are probably going to be messy, maybe awkward.
You absolutely have to tolerate that productive discomfort of being a beginner again. You're not committing on day one to perfect, flawless execution forevermore. You're simply committing to showing up today as the person you intend to become. That's it.
And the sources seem absolutely clear on this. Struggling, even imperfectly, towards something you've decided is meaningful is always going to be superior to just staying comfortable, staying safe, but slowly suffocating in stagnation.
Always. And that very first small step you manage to take, the one you define clearly and successfully execute within the next 24 hours. It isn't some magic bullet. It doesn't guarantee you'll reach the final destination. But what it does do, absolutely unfailingly, is it provides the proof. Proof to yourself that change is possible for you. Proof that you can follow through on a small promise you make to yourself. Proof that you can begin right now closing that gap between who you are today and the person you aspire to become.
And that initial piece of proof, however small, becomes the absolutely indispensable foundation for building that new identity we talked about. Remember, real transformation doesn't usually happen in those dramatic overnight leaps. It happens in the quiet accumulation of tiny steps taken consistently, layered one on top of the other over time.
Consistency compounds.
So I'll leave you with this final thought to maybe chew on today, a provocative question to take into your next 24 hours. What tiny, imperfect, maybe even slightly awkward piece of proof can you create for yourself, starting right now, that will begin to solidify the identity you truly want to build? Go make the start.